About 6 weeks ago, the Lord laid upon a series upon my heart, and then last week happened, and so now it's been about 7 weeks that this series has been floating around in my mind, and it's a series that's most likely going to become a yearly series in our church. Some churches do yearly series. Maybe you've been to a church or seen a church that does like an at the movies series kind of thing, where they find biblical principles from movies, and those are awesome things. I like those things. I've never really felt led to do that particular one here, but the Lord laid upon this series that might float around at different times of the year throughout the years to come, but it's here in the heart of summer that we begin this topic of larger than life. Larger than life. And in Larger Than Life, we'll be doing a deep dive exploration of some of the most well-known Bible characters or individuals in the Bible. These are your A-listers, guys. These are your Moses, your Abrahams, your Davids. Not your B-listers, guys. Not your Cleopases or anything like that. As much as I love the B-listers in the Bible, but these are your A-listers, the ones that are, as we would say, larger than life. We're going to explore their lives, birth to death, highs and lows, victories and defeats. We'll see the ways maybe some of them wandered from God and the ways that they returned to God. We'll see the ways that God used them and carried influence in the day that they lived, as well as how their influence has transcended to our day and age today. And in this journey, we will see how, though they are larger than life, hopefully by the end of it, we can see that possibly we're a little bit more relatable than what we would give it credit for in the beginning. That from the outside looking in, once I get inside their story, I might find that I'm actually in good company with some of them. And ultimately, we'll see how Jesus plays into their story and ours, and that he is truly the one that is larger than life. For our first case study this summer, I know a guy. I know a perfect guy. All right, some of you, like 3 of you, laughed at my corny joke. One of you did it sarcastically. We're going to talk about Noah for the next 7 weeks. Most people, believers or not, they're pretty familiar with Noah. They're familiar with him. He's easily the most well-known person in the Bible. Noah was on this planet for 950 years, 600 years before the flood, and then 350 after the flood. And his entire account is contained within 4 chapters of the Bible, Genesis chapter 6 through 9. And those 4 chapters only cover roughly 1 year of his life. That's why the Russell Crowe movie that came out 10 years ago is pretty out of touch with Scripture, because there's not a whole lot of content to cover to make a 2.5-hour blockbuster out of. And you might be wondering, how are we going to stretch this out to 7 weeks? Because though there's only 4 chapters to come from, there's a lot to this man. And in this series, we're going to look at the task he was given. We're going to look at his fears and uncertainty that probably plagued his soul. We're going to look at his hope and his faith that shined so bright. We'll look at the reward that he received, the regret that he carried, and his legacy that endures. But before we get into all of that, today I wanted to begin by looking at his name, because all that Noah is known for and is found in Genesis chapters 6, 7, 8, and 9, his account actually begins at Genesis chapter 5. And it's at the end of the Bible's first genealogy. It's a genealogy that begins with Adam and ends with Noah. And in the concluding verses of that genealogy, we read this in Genesis chapter 5, starting in verse 28. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son, and he named him Noah and said, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." If you skip to verse 32, it then says, after Noah was 500 years old, he then became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Today, the introductory message to this series is called Subverting Expectations. Subverting Expectations. Let me pray for you one more time. Lord, I pray for your people. I pray that once again that you will just have your way within our hearts and minds. Lord, do not let your word return void. Allow it to do within the soil of our lives exactly what you wanted to do. Produce a harvest 30, 60, 100 times more that's planted in Jesus' name. Amen. Typically, you read a verse like verse 29. He named him Noah and said, he will comfort us. And you might assume that Noah's name means comfort. You might make that assumption, but comfort is not the meaning of Noah's name. Noah in the original Hebrew means rest. Yet the noun Noah, Noach in Hebrew, it sounds incredibly similar to the Hebrew word nakam, which does mean to comfort or to give relief. And Lamech, he sees the curse that's upon his life. In fact, he uses the exact same words that God used to describe what the curse would be when he put it upon mankind in Genesis chapter 3. He said to Adam, "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat from it all the days of your life." And he expects Noah. Lamech expects Noach to be Nakam. He expects Noach to bring comfort. He expects Noach to bring comfort from painful labor and toil. That is the plight that is his life. Perhaps Lamech was hoping that Noah would be the long-expected fulfillment of the promise to crush the serpent's head. Of course, Lamech had no idea how God would turn his words around and fulfill that prophecy and that promise in God's perfect way. But Lamech has expectations of Noah. And it's the prerogative of every parent to expect great things from their kids and for their kids. Yet in the imagination that God has given me, I wonder how much of this weighed heavy on Noah throughout his life. The hopes and dreams of his father taking 600 years to come to pass. Lamech is 182 when Noah is born. He's 777 when he dies. If I math correctly, and I do believe I math correctly, he died 5 years before the flood. 5 years before he was able to see how God would use Noah. 5 years before he was able to see how comfort and relief to a sin-stricken world would be brought because of Noah. And in fact, the last 115 years of Lamech's life, he was watching Noah build an ark, assuming that he bought into his son's claim that that God told Noah to do it. And assuming all of that, Noah didn't begin fulfilling his father's expectation of him for 500 years. I imagine how it's tough for Noah growing up under the name Noach. Always expected to bring comfort, though. Always expected to be Nakam. Every time Noah gets in trouble. Every time Noah rebels as a teenager. Every time Noah does something that subverts the expectations of his father, I imagine he's reminded about the day he was born, and Lamech holds him in his arms and he says, "You're Noach. You're supposed to bring peace and comfort, not add strife to my life." And for half a millennia, Lamech watched his son, the bringer of comfort from painful turmoil and labor, proceed in the humdrum of daily life while the world wasted away in sin. And I just found myself wondering if for half a millennia did Noah have to listen to his dad ask, "When are you going to get up and do something about this?" You know, there's a lot of speculation that we can make from a single statement from someone who's never mentioned of ever again in the Bible. But that's the speculation that this message is based on, and for my message today, subverting expectations. When we subvert expectations, it means to behave contrary to the established belief or assumption. The term is usually described in the entertainment industry. It's where it gets its genesis from. It's a technique to surprise the audience, to create suspense, or to inject a fresh perspective into a familiar narrative. And that's what I want to do with Noah in this series, and particularly today. I want to inject a fresh perspective into a familiar narrative. And we can look at all the different ways that he subverted expectations. For 500 years, he subverted expectations. He's expected to have a family. But it's 500 years into his life that he finally has kids. Even Abraham, and Sarah, who struggled with infertility, were able to finally have kids a century into living. Noah subverted expectations. He doesn't act or behave like those around him. God calls him righteous and blameless. Genesis says he walks faithfully with God. Noah subverts expectations. You would expect that somebody that's building the ark, a boat, a structure, the size of what Noah's building, by hand, they would give up after a little bit of time. I mean, we would give up. I'm pretty certain I know I would give up. I had some fun this morning with it. I just decided seeing what potentially it would cost at a bare minimum. And so I did a basic little bit of math and tried to figure out the dimensions of the ark versus the cost of lumber today. And for what I figure, for the low price of $165,312, which in the long run is not that much considering what you're building, would get us 5,744 pieces of 2 by 10 by 16, Sister Pam, pressure treated. And I know most of us have the tools to do what needs to be done to build this thing. Let's go ahead and do it. How many's up for it? All right, I got 2. All right, see, not many of us. Noah subverts expectations because for a century he's cutting down the trees, man. All we have to do is order the wood. And they'll deliver it right here. Noah, he cuts down the wood. He transports the wood to his building site. He creates the planks. He carves out the nails and the pegs. And he assembles a boat that's 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet tall. And he never wavers in the task. He subverts expectations. After a year of being cooped up in the ark with his wife, his adult kids, and their wives, I love my wife, I love my kids, and I know you love yours too, but we don't spend all day of every day in an enclosed space, do we? Sometimes, Junior, your wife tells you, get out of the house, leave me alone. I bet after about 6 weeks, right as that flood was ending, or the rains were stopping, it started to get real tense in that ark. Started to get real tense. And then 10 months later, they finally see dry ground, and you would expect Noah to jump out and set up camp, yet he waits another 7 weeks. 1 month and 27 days later, God says, now get out. You can leave. When it's all said and done, Noah's created his altar. The animals are set free. God's made his promise. Life begins its new normal. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they start having their own kids. You would expect Noah to live out his days as the one that we read about at the beginning, the one who's righteous, the one that's blameless, the one that faithfully built the ark, the one that steadfastly rode out the flood, the one that gratefully erected an altar. But the final way that we see Noah in Genesis 9, the one that would be expected to bring freedom and relief from painful turmoil and labor, we see him passed out naked, drunk in his tent. Once again, subverting expectations. Noah's entire life, it's a theme of subverting expectations, surprising everyone around, injecting a fresh perspective. And perhaps today, you're in the same boat as Noah. No pun intended. You've been subverting expectations your entire life because there's people in your life, and they've expected you to act a certain way. They've expected you to talk a certain way. They've expected you to think a certain way. And whenever you've acted or talked or spoke or thought about any way outside of those parameters, those people, whomever they might be your parents, they might be your family, they might be your friends, they might be your coworkers, your neighbors, they have not been shy in holding back how you've let them down. Perhaps today you're struggling with the level of expectation that's been placed upon you. It's unrealistic. It's out of date or no longer applicable. Maybe it is inappropriate for the time that we live. Whatever it is, today is the day to rid of ourselves of a toxic expectation. And I'm challenged by the thought, let's subvert all expectations, except the ones from him who is worthy to make them of us. Let's subvert all expectations except the expectations of Jesus. It's not that I shouldn't care what people think about me or what anybody expects of me. I mean, I find that often Christ can be honored because I do care. Because I do make an effort to meet their expectations, Christ can be honored. I mean, scriptures, they say clearly, husbands, love your wives. Wives, submit to your husbands. Children, obey your parents. Workers, listen to your employers. This is our command to embrace expectations. But in that act, let's make sure we aren't being taken captive to or becoming captors of unreasonable or toxic expectations. And so today, disciples and followers of Jesus, is the day that I want to challenge you to subvert the expectations, the ones others have made of you and the ones you've placed upon others people. And today is the day to inject our world with a fresh perspective. And of course, just like always, I do have 3 for you. 3 ways to subject the world with a fresh perspective. The first one is as followers of Jesus, we don't exploit expectations. We don't exploit them. The greatest way we can subvert expectations in our world today is stop exploiting them of other people. In fact, the world would expect us to exploit our will over theirs because that's the way it works for them. That's the way it's always been for them. That's how someone else got to the top over them. That's how they got to the top over someone else, because it was my way over their way. But it can be easy to forget when that's the norm of the culture around us, that Jesus, he commands us to prefer others above ourselves. And that includes preferring the choices that they make for their lives over what I would choose. Oh, this point's really easy to preach to parents, especially parents of teenagers. Because, there's so many decisions those youngins make that, if they only knew what I knew, if they only knew what I experienced. Man, we as parents, of course we have expectations of our kids. It's only natural. But we can take it so far. We can take it too far. We do it to our kids all the time. We place expectations upon them of excellence and obligation that we ourselves were never able to achieve. I can see how Lamech's imposed expectation of Noah, it's a beautiful thing because he desires for God to use his son in an impactful way. But I can also see how it's intrinsically selfish. Because I can also see this man that's tired. He's 87 years old, 88 years old. He's tired. He's worked hard. He wants peace. He needs rest. And he's looking for happiness and fulfillment. And he's placed those desires for happiness and fulfillment upon the shoulders of his son. And when we as individuals, whether we are parents or not, place the dependency of our happiness and our fulfillment upon the actions or the shoulders of another people, it's not just improper expectations, it's an exploitation of expectation. Because there is only one in whom we should expect our happiness and fulfillment to originate from, and his name is Jesus. Jesus is the only one that I can put that expectation upon. And if you're expecting happiness and fulfillment to come from your kids, or if you're expecting to come from your spouse, or if you're expecting to come from your friends, or any other person that's in your life today, anyone else other than Jesus to be the source of your peace, your joy, your fulfillment, your happiness, you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking in the wrong place. You don't have to be a parent to exploit expectations. You don't have to be married to exploit expectations. You don't have to be over other people to exploit expectations. Perhaps if we would be honest with ourselves today, we would be able to see that there are times that we expect more from someone else than what we expect of ourselves. And we probably do it a little more often than what we'd like to admit. There's a simple litmus that we can look at to see if that's the case. And it was this right here, is do I expect to receive grace but fail to give grace? Do I expect to be shown kindness but fail to be kind? Do I expect consistency from others but fail to be faithful myself? Let's make sure we don't enforce a standard on others that we refuse to engage in ourselves. And do you know who we exploit the most often? We usually exploit ourselves the most. We hold ourselves to impossible standards that virtually no one would be able to hold themselves to. There's no chance in succeeding. And then we tailspin in sorrow and regret when it all doesn't happen the way it should. But where if we would have managed the expectation of ourselves differently, allowed ourselves grace, allowed ourselves a margin for growth, allowed ourselves to not have to be a perfect version of ourselves, we'd still find that Jesus, who is the same yesterday and today and forever, he's still granting the same opportunity because he's expecting you to embrace the opportunity to love him and to live for him. Oh, the comfort for all your labor and the comfort for all your toil and turmoil today, it's found in and only in Jesus. Expect it. The second thing, we as followers of Jesus can show a different kind of expectation is this: we don't excuse expectations. We don't excuse expectations. I'm not one to recycle messages, meaning if I've preached it once, I'm usually not one to pull it out again. However, there is a message that I preached about 5 years ago. It's while we were away from Crossroads. I preached it about 5 years ago. And I haven't preached it at Crossroads, though I have intended to. It's called Living in Ono. Living in Ono. And it's a message that begins with a really obscure verse that's found in 1 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 12. It says, the son of Elpah were Eber, Misham, Shemed, and it says, who built the towns of Ono, Lod, and their nearby villages. And that's it. And the message, I'll give you a short synopsis of it real quick. The message is about how from the outside looking in, the town of Ono seems like a great place to live. It seems awesome. It's clean. It's trendy, the houses are nice, it looks really awesome. But once you're there, you find out that it's not as great as what you expected it to be or believed it was. It's filled with decay, it's filled with discouragement, it's filled with destruction. And you can tell that you're living in Ono or not by the street names. One of the street names is, oh no, you didn't. And it's a land of offense, it's a house of offense if you're always offended. There's, oh no, I didn't. And it's a place of missed opportunity where you live in regret all the time. I mentioned that today because one of the streets in the town of Ono is this. It's, oh no, you shouldn't. And it's a place of imposed opinions and expectations. Now the point ends up going to talk about how we try to impose those opinions and expectations upon others, because we expect them to think how we think and feel how we feel and act how we want. And when they don't, we let them know. It's a place of imposed opinions. To subvert expectations this morning, we need and we must stop excusing what others have imposed upon us. We must stop excusing what we have imposed upon other people. How many times have you heard or even said this? It's just the way they are. It's just the way I am. It's just the way it's always been. When we stop making excuses for toxic expectations, when we limit the ability for toxic expectations to take root in our lives, we don't excuse any expectation that will not serve the agenda of Christ growing in me. We don't excuse any expectation that will hinder someone else from growing in Christ. And we call it out when we see it. We call it out when we see it in myself and in others. I've always been infatuated or really loved the account, I guess, with what happened in Galatians chapter 2 between Paul and Peter. Paul was in a situation where he could not excuse a toxic expectation that Peter had carried into a situation, and he confronts it head on. Peter had joined Paul in Antioch, and when he first arrived, Peter enjoyed eating with Gentile believers, people that had given their life to Jesus, but these would be men specifically that weren't circumcised. And when friends of his colleague James come from Jerusalem to Antioch, Peter, he stops eating with the Gentiles because he's concerned with their expectations of him. How are these people that my buddy James has sent, people that he probably doesn't even know, how are they going to be perceiving the company I'm keeping? There's nothing wrong with the way Peter is doing or who he's eating with. The error is that Peter has made an excuse for other people's expectation when he should have been eradicating them. And because Peter excused improper expectations of them, Galatians 2:13 says other Gentile and Jewish believers were led astray by Peter's hypocrisy, and that even Barnabas was led astray. So Paul did what Paul had to do, and he confronts Peter, and he doesn't make an excuse for any expectation that doesn't belong. How do we subvert expectations, whether our own or someone else's? By not making excuses for it. If it shouldn't be there, it shouldn't be there, and don't let it be there. If we are in Christ, we are a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. That includes my old self and my old expectations. There's no excuse for them anymore. The final thing this morning, as followers of Jesus, we don't extinguish expectations. We don't extinguish them either. I was pretty hard on Lamech at the beginning of the message. I'll lighten up on him here as we close. I wonder how much of his encouragement and how much of his prayer for Noah to be a comfort from labor and painful turmoil, I wonder how that might have kept Noah a righteous and blameless path for 500 years. Perhaps the Noah that we know of today came to be because he had a father that refused to extinguish expectation. This message of subverting expectation has mainly been about not being held captive to those things that are unreasonable or overbearing upon ourselves or others. If they're in your life or if they're coming from your life, don't make excuses for them and don't exploit them anymore. But you can have high expectations from others without it being toxic. And it's those God-centered expectations that should never be extinguished. Subvert all expectations by pointing your ambition and your expectancy of others to a drive and a pursuit that will take you and someone else to a greater depth than Jesus. That will help you know him more. That will help you grow deeper in him. That will help you grow stronger in him. That will help you make you more reliant upon him. That's going to make you hungry for him more. Lord, I don't want to be satisfied by where I'm at today. I want to raise the bar so that I can be a more dedicated disciple tomorrow. I don't strive, Lord, to extinguish expectations in my life. I don't seek to rid myself of those that hold me to a higher standard. I'm praying earnestly, Lord, to make me aware of your expectations through them. That, Lord, you've placed people in my life. You've placed friends. You've placed family. You've placed people that I work with. You've placed people that I've considered inconsequential up until this moment of time, but they are here in my life now, and you've placed them in my life for such a time as this. And Lord, I want to commit myself deeper to you because of what they challenge me to be. Oh, Jesus, help me not to extinguish your expectation in my life. Help me not to extinguish your expectation in my life. Do you feel like you're on cursed ground today? Do you feel like you're on cursed ground today? Are you tired and weary today? Has the labor and the toil of your life begun to wear deep within you? This morning, keep an expectation for God and the ways of God forefront in your life today. Don't let them go out today. Keep your expectation for Jesus high. Keep it high this morning. He's the comfort you need. He's the peace that you need. He's the hope that you need. Noah, he seems larger than life. But Noah doesn't provide freedom from painful turmoil. It's only Jesus. It's only Jesus. God used Noah in an incredible way because Noah was obedient, because Noah worked hard, because he refused to quit. But Jesus came from the will of the Father. Jesus worked hard, and Jesus refused to quit. And Jesus is the one that fulfills all expectation today. Has expectation in your life what people have expected of you? Has it been more than you can bear? Would you place it upon Jesus today? Have you held people to a higher standard than what you should have? Would you place it upon Jesus today? Have you been not as challenged to progress further and deeper in your walk as what you should? Would you cling tighter to Jesus today? Would you bow your head and close your eyes with me this morning?